Hello, my name is Tom Vassallo with MRW Financial Brokerage. I appreciate everyone taking the time to attend this webinar today on efficient long-term care planning for the affluent. You know, this really came about for two reasons, this particular webinar. With all of this social distancing and everything, we've seen our practices have to change quite a bit. LIMRA recently did a study on how social distancing affected advisor sales. And 9 in 10 financial professionals said not being able to meet with clients in person has been the main effect the coronavirus pandemic has had on our practice. 3 out of 4 advisors are saying they've been making more sales to existing clients. And that makes sense. People do business with people they trust and that they like. And it's hard to build that relationship when we can't meet with our clients one-on-one or our new prospects one-on-one. So more and more people are going back to their existing clients that they have a relationship with, that they have that trust established with, and plugging any financial holes they may have in their plan. Well, I believe one of the most undersold product solutions is planning for long-term care, and especially when it comes to high net worth individuals. When we take a look at the existing clients and what they are, existing advisors and what they are done, 24% of advisors surveyed said all of their sales since this social distancing and pandemic has started has been to existing clients. 54% of financial advisors said a higher percentage than normal of their sales have been to existing clients versus new prospects. Just 17% have said a higher percentage of their sales have been to new clients than normal. And just 5% have exclusively sold new clients. I think that 17% and that 5% are people that were already selling online, and the pandemic and this social distancing has made the consumer more open to purchasing products online. So the point of the matter is, if you have affluent, high net worth clients that you haven't talked to about long-term care and a plan to fund long-term care, now may be the time. Now, I've been specializing in long-term care for about 30 years now. And 5 or 6 years ago, Matt Wickman, the founder of the firm, and I were meeting with a client, high net worth client, assets north of $25 million. And we're putting together some estate planning concepts. We were meeting here in our office with the client and their accountant. And at the end of the meeting, we asked the accountant what he thought about our recommendations. And he said, I agree with everything everything you've presented, except for one thing. What about long-term care? And Matt and I looked at each other and said, it's a high net worth client. He's worth $25 million. He has the assets to fund long-term care. And the accountant took a look at us and said, you know what? Long-term care is not an asset issue. It's a cash flow issue. It's not about assets. It's about all of a sudden we have an increased expense of $100,000 a year. And how are we going to generate the cash flow? And what's it going to cost for this client to liquidate those assets and create that cash flow to fund long-term care? So we need to reshape our thinking a little bit. Long-term care isn't an asset issue, it's a cash flow issue. Now, if the client has over $100,000 of disposable income in today's dollars, of just excess income a year that they can devote to long-term care, maybe it's not much of a conversation. But many clients have assets. The question is, what is it going to cost to liquidate those assets to fund long-term care? And we're going to go over 7 consequences here at a relatively high level. Some of these charts are going to be kind of hard to follow on this webinar. So at the end of the webinar, this one's late in the day, so probably tomorrow morning, I'll email out to everyone that attended the webinar a white paper that goes into more detail and provides you these charts. Let's talk about consequence number 1, sequence of return risk. We talk about sequence of return risk quite a bit when we're talking about creating retirement income, but it can affect long-term care as well. And here's an illustration of sequence of return risk. We're taking 2 different sequence of returns. It's the exact same returns, we're just reversing them. And during the accumulation phase, or if we're not pulling money out, we can start with $1 million. 10 years later, it doesn't matter the sequence of returns, we end up with just over $2 million. You can see that there at the bottom. That's a 7.18% rate of return over the 10 years. Sequence of return doesn't matter when the money's just sitting there accumulating. But what if all of a sudden we have $100,000 of long-term care costs that we have to pull out of this brokerage account? Well, in option number one, when we had a 10% rate of return in the first year, a 5% rate of return in the second year, and a negative 4% in the third year, we end up with $800,000 still in the account after we've pulled that $300,000 out. But if we have that reverse sequence of returns, we only have $500,000. So on top of taking the $300,000 out, there's a difference of $300,000 in the account. Now, I was around in 2007, 2008, working with a lot of physicians on their retirement plans when the stock market turned south and every asset class was down. It was easy for those physicians to work a couple of more years so they didn't have to withdraw from their account when the market was down. You don't have the ability to postpone a long-term care need for 2 or 3 years waiting for the market to rebound. So sequence of return risk, if your client is counting on a brokerage account to fund long-term care, can be a real issue. Consequence number 2, tax exposure risk. When we're retired, not only do we have ordinary income tax, and what this chart is showing is what's subject to FICA, what's subject to ordinary income tax rates, what's subject to capital gains rates, qualified dividend rates, what may be subject to a 10% penalty tax if you're under age 59 and a half. But you also have to remember that 3.8% excise tax. You also have to remember the Medicare surcharge on your Medicare premiums if you go over certain income amounts. You also have to remember, wonder what is included in your provisional income to determine whether 0%, 50%, or 85% of your Social Security is taxable. And it goes down different assets here that your client may have. Now, not all of these are going to not every client is going to be subject to every one of these, but I'd be willing to bet that the vast majority of your clients, depending on what assets they're going to use to fund long-term care, could be subject to these. And if you look down at the bottom, you'll see the things where they'll have no impact on taxes, on their Medicare surcharge, and on their provisional income for Social Security, and that's loans out of a life insurance policy or a reverse mortgage, so that's a way to access funds, Roth qualified withdrawals, life insurance FIFO withdrawals up to basis, qualified withdrawals out of your HSA account, and then qualified long-term care insurance benefits. Everything else is going to have an impact on your client's taxes, and the question is, what is it going to cost your client, again, to generate that existing cash flow? Are we talking about liquidating property that now is going to be subject to a capital gains tax that could receive a free step-up in basis if they hold that property until they pass away? Are we talking about liquidating capital stocks that have increased in value that, again, would have a free step-up in basis when those taxes could be completely avoided? This is just another chart that we'll have in that white paper that we send you that, again, shows you which assets are subject to the various tax liabilities or costs that your client may have in creating that additional cash flow. Consequence number 3, I touched on a little bit, loss of step-up in basis. Your client may have stocks that are highly appreciated, mutual funds that are highly appreciated, a business asset that's highly appreciated, real estate, maybe even their family home. And if all of a sudden they're forced to liquidate some of these highly appreciated assets while they're alive and are subject to capital gains tax, it's something that can be completely avoided if they hold those assets until they pass away. And it could be many other capital assets that may have capital gains that could be subject to this. So you have to take a look at your client's situation, and are we going to expose them to a capital gains tax that could be completely avoided if we don't do some planning for long-term care? What about business succession plans? I have a good friend down in Bradenton, Florida. He was in the insurance business. He happens to be an attorney. His father was in the insurance business, and he has 2 sisters. from Indiana. The father and his mother took all of their liquid assets, put them into annuities to generate lifetime income for them. They had three primary assets left that were part of the estate plan. One daughter was working in the business. She got the business long before the parents passed away. That was her inheritance. The other child was living up in the Indiana area. She got the home in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that was valued at the same amount as the condominium that my friend received that was out on Longboat Key, in Longboat Key, Florida. What if all of a sudden, though, they had a long-term care event and they needed to liquidate the home or liquidate the condo on Longboat Key to fund that care? Now all of a sudden that balance that they had, because everything was appraised at the same value when they were putting together their estate plan, is out of balance. And now what are you going to do? Have the daughter that's been working in the business and inherited years ago make up the shortfall to the other children? So it can throw off those business succession plans. It can throw off that estate plan that they put together. Consequence number 5 is filial laws. Now, many of you on this call here are based here in Florida, and filial laws don't apply in Florida. But what if they have parents in another state, or what if they choose to receive care and retire in another state? If you're not familiar with these, I'll give you an example. In 2012, the Superior Court of Pennsylvania upheld a $93,000 judgment against a son for a mother's unpaid nursing home bills. The mother left the nursing home, moved to Greece. The child had the means to pay for that. The nursing home sued the child for the $93,000, won it. The child appealed it to the Superior Court of Pennsylvania, and that judgment was upheld. Now, this is the real scary part, is there's a chance that they had a Medicaid claim, but the court disallowed that. Still said, no, the child has to pay. There were other children involved. The other children weren't sued. Just the one son was, and he was held liable for the $93,000. There are 30 states that have filial laws. 21 of them allow civil judgments against children for care of the parents. Excuse me. 12 of them actually impose criminal penalties if you don't fund your parents' care, and 3 states allow both civil and criminal penalties. So it's not uncommon. We've had, especially with the new asset-based long-term care policies, we've had children buy policies on the parents where the children are the owners and beneficiaries of the policy, and the parents are the insured of the policy. Consequence number 6, trust assets may be used inefficiently. By the way, if you have clients that have annuities, IRAs, and the beneficiary of the IRA is a trust, especially if a spouse is still alive, you better take a look at that, because I'm helping an agent right now with a death claim on a gentleman who had several IRAs that were in annuities. The children were worried that if if mom predeceased the dad, that one of the children would end up with a lot of the funds. They'd been sort of sponging off of the parents, and the father would usually give the funds to him. So they wanted the funds to go into a trust. Well, the husband passed away first, and now with the new Secure Act, those funds are going into the trust, and the spouse cannot continue his IRAs. Those IRAs have to be distributed out over 10 years, and this is the problem. The trust income tax rate hits the maximum income tax rate at about $12,000 in income. So all of this income is coming into that trust. So we don't want IRAs, the beneficiaries of IRAs, to be trusts anymore. Also, there's many irrevocable life insurance trusts out there that may be holding a life insurance policy that isn't needed for estate tax liquidity anymore. Many of these were put together when the estate tax exemption was $600,000 per person. Some of these ILITs may unintentionally disinherit a spouse if they've not been updated. A lot of them, so we could avoid future updating, where the 600,000 went to 700,000, went to 800,000, said we want to put the maximum amount based on the estate tax exclusion in the trust, and then the balance to be to the unlimited spousal transfer. Well, now when we have a $5 or $6 million estate tax exemption, we may have completely disinherited a spouse if we didn't update these ILITs. Well, the trust can actually own that long-term care policy. A lot of times we can do a 1035 out of that life insurance policy into an asset-based long-term care policy. The trust can make the claim and be reimbursed the benefits, and those benefits come in tax-free, so we aren't worried about that low income tax threshold with the trust. And then the trust can make loans to the parent's estate to pay for care. So there are workarounds if clients have trust assets, and it's a great asset to earmark to self-fund long-term care. By the way, when we're talking about affluent clients and needing long-term care, my last two personal sales, both of the clients have had net worth north of $5 million. So it's not your traditional blue-collar long-term care buyer. And consequence number 7 is you waste a chance to leverage business income. Many qualified long-term care policies, and there are asset-based plans that have qualified long-term care premiums, are deductible to both pass-through and C corporations. Technically, they're deductible off a person's individual tax return, but very few individuals are actually going to realize a tax deduction. But if they have a healthcare savings account and a self-employment income, we can get the deductions. There's no concerns with ERISA or discrimination testing. And if they have a C Corp, there's tremendous tax benefits for it. In fact, if you have a contractor with a C Corp that has to keep their balance sheet intact because of bonding capacity, we actually have policies out there that we can keep the money completely liquid. They can move $200,000 or $300,000 out of that CD that's earning nothing, that has to stay on the balance sheet for bonding capacity. Keep it completely liquid, so no bond capacity hit at all. Get a 30 to 40% tax deduction for the premium that goes in, and leverage it into a long-term care and death benefit. And if they still need the money for that bond, it's available and liquid to them. Once again, this was a real quick sort of 30,000-foot overview of some of the consequences high net worth individuals have. And I want to leave you with one thing, and I'm going to email to you the white paper that discusses all of this in detail. But I want to leave with you one thing. Where we're really having a lot of success lately is with the Pension Protection Act. We find there are many clients out there that own non-qualified annuities that they bought years ago. You ask them about it, they are unhappy they bought the thing. Maybe they've doubled their money in it over the last 10 or 15 years, but every dollar they take out is subject to ordinary income tax, which may affect their excise tax, which could push up their Social Security, which could increase their Medicare premium, so they aren't touching it, these non-qualified funds. And because there's no required minimum distribution, it's become more of a legacy play. They're going to just pass that on to their kids, let their kids deal with the taxes. Well, if you have assets out there that are capital assets with capital gains, why would you want to give up a free step-up in basis and use it to fund long-term care? If you have IRA assets and you're just taking out required minimum distribution, why would you want to increase your withdrawals $100,000 a year to fund long-term care when you can take advantage of the Pension Protection Act, roll that non-qualified annuity into one that's compliant with the Pension Protection Act, and every dollar of it that comes out for long-term care is income tax-free, and those taxes are completely avoided. This conversation is not as much about funding a $60,000 or $70,000 a year long-term care expense. It's more about, I've got this $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 annuity with substantial gains in it. Is there a way I can ever avoid income taxes on it? And if we put $100,000 in, it may be able to become $300,000 for long-term care, or even a lifetime benefit. I don't care how the non-qualified annuity is owned and who the annuitant is. We can cover both husband and wife on the same policy. And guess what? If they don't use the benefits for long-term care, it still passes on to their children with the same tax consequences. So a real opportunity there. I think the most help that we can provide, or where we really shine, is, I've sat across the kitchen table from clients as an advisor. I've sold these policies. I still do today. And I'm available to you one-on-one for that, hey, I've got this guy conversation. We're obviously going to just work on our overrides if we're providing that back office support. Even if you want to get me involved in a Zoom meeting while you're meeting with your clients, happy to do that with just an override. If you're on the west coast of Florida and you want me to come out and meet with a client, there'd have to be some sort of split in commission. We're happy to provide that support as well. Thank you, everyone, for the time. If you do have any questions, my contact information is here on the screen, and I appreciate it. Bye now.